Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. We got 5 out of 6 members, so we have quorum. It's 6:05, and so I'm calling the meeting to order. We have an agenda. You'll see the agenda. It's basically the usual format, a couple of delegations, a couple of items of business, some correspondence. So need a mover and seconder for the agenda as printed. Moved by Councillor Doherty, second by Councillor Sanek. Any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And then we have the confirmation of minutes from August 6th. Need a mover who was present at that meeting. Moved by Councillor Doherty and a seconder, Councillor Neal. Any errors or omission of those minutes? Seeing none, we'll vote on the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Delegations. So we have 2 delegations. The first is Joyce Hostin, resident, who is speaking to us regarding front yard gardens, boulevard gardens, and community gardens. So you come up to the lectern here. Once you're ready to go, I believe you have a presentation? Yes. So she has a presentation, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and then there are questions after that. I do keep track of time, and I will give you a 1-minute warning. Go ahead.
Striving for the perfect lawn, which we now know are a climate disaster and they're contributing to our problems. It's time to reimagine curb appeal, which I don't know if you know, but a leaf blower in one afternoon emits as much as an old Ford truck driven across coast to coast. We need to adopt landscape care practices that reduce emissions, store carbon, and increase biodiversity. This is Lakeside's pollinator garden, which we had 13 different species of butterflies in 1 hour. We also need to reflect in our landscapes our place and take a look. Can you tell which is Kingston versus Saudi Arabia versus Texas versus New York? You can't. And yet, we're Kingston, we're unique. And also to promote the well-being of current and future generations of all beings. Our forgotten ally is nature. Right now, 1% of public discussion is about natural climate solutions, 3% of funding. Natural climate solutions offer immense possibility for helping Kingston achieve our strategic goals, particularly demonstrating leadership on climate action and fostering healthy citizens and vibrant spaces. Our bylaws, though, need some tweaking, our yard bylaw and our noise bylaw. We live, the territory that we inhabit is Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe. We're not really reflecting that. We're in the Mixed Wood Plains Ecozone, Great Lake St. Lawrence. That's my front yard, which was profiled this summer in the press. And that's a natural forest. We also are native grasslands of Napanee Plain, a really unique ecosystem which we're not reflecting in our landscaping. There's a movement afoot, and I'm not talking about the climate strikes that have been going on. I'm talking about a positive movement. Already happening in Kingston, across our city, we're starting to see people convert their front lawns into natural landscapes, into wildscapes that invite biodiversity, that store carbon in the soil, that help with food security, and just beautify our city, promote community. These are all in Kingston. Our ask, and with Master Gardeners, is that the city model the way with new practices, organic mowing and land care practices, experimenting with polyculture hydroseeding. Update policies to help us citizens take action, so bylaw changes so that we don't have to mow, we can have grass, ornamental and native grasses, banning 2-stroke engines, targeting targets and incentives, considering those for converting our lawns. Co-create with partners experiences that help trigger behavior changes, so simple processes for adopting green spaces, Paris has a really simple form that you can fill out, supporting wildscaping and foodscaping. Here's what we can offer. We are starting wildscaping workshops and building content on our website. We can offer region-specific resources, expertise, and education, help activate citizens, and offer support in events and ideas like stop putting your leaves out. Behavior change, this is going to be our big challenge. Changing ideas about the perfect lawn is really about re-educating people to think in a different way. And yet, 36%, some studies say, of climate action can be done by individuals changing practices, and that includes changing how individuals care for their lawns. The upside, look at those two landscapes, just imagine. One's in Seoul, Korea, the other one's in Kingston. But also, upsides include demonstrating climate leadership, the fostering healthy citizens and vibrant spaces.
1 minute.
Innovating new business models. This is one that I was just talking to the Director of Social Innovation at Queen's in their master's program, and she's really excited about the innovation possibilities of natural climate solutions. Around the world, things are happening that we're not currently doing. Atlanta, a 10-acre food forest to tackle food security. Qatar, a productive permaculture campus, the whole university they're converting. Paris, 50% of their city is targeted for forest planted areas. That's the proposed Garden Lyon planting. Sheffield, transforming from gray to green. Seaside Florida, only native plants in front yards. Toronto, biodiversity strategy. Sweden, other countries naturalizing parks and public spaces. Christchurch, an edible city because of disaster resilience. Victoria Boulevard Gardens. Edible trails are springing up across. Kitchener partnering with citizens to love their hoods. Converting brown spaces to wildscapes and foodscapes. Natural climate solutions offer immense possibility for helping Kingston, for helping us achieve our climate and strategic goals. And we, Master Gardeners, can partner with you in helping you achieve those goals, but need your support.
Great. You obviously rehearsed that to get it into 5 minutes. That's a lot of information. Very, very well done. So, questions from the committee are now in order. Councillor Doherty.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. There was a lot there, and I wonder if I have two questions. One is, I would love to have a copy of your presentation, just to really have a chance to look at it closely. And also, when you say you need our support, can you be more specific about that?
Well, okay, support in terms of reflecting by your own landscaping practices, so showing the way by starting to do this in your own public spaces. So roadside verges could be converted into meadows. Setting targets and incentives, so that's another way of supporting, is setting a target and saying, can 25% Kingston convert front lawns? Prototyping. So prototype polyculture hydroseeding. We are talking around the Oak Street K&P Trail there about a potential experiment there. So and there seems to be some receptivity, so just official receptivity to the experiments that we want to try. Updating the yard and noise bylaws. So technically, most of those things, the yards that you saw, are breaking the bylaws. So if somebody complained, probably the city wouldn't. We have, in the wildscaping work that we've started, had and put a limit on 10 people to sign up. One of them was actually out of town, and the reason she moved out into the country was because the city came and mowed down her perennials, her edible patch, and charged her then $600 and some. So she left the city. And so the bylaws are impacting, banning the two-stroke engines. I mean, that's just the emissions that they pollute, that they give off. Introducing, so in trying to adopt a public space right now, we have to create a community garden, get a board of directors, get liability insurance, go through. At Lakeside, we're just about to plant our edible forest, 2 years into it. That's a long time to go through a process. Paris has this really short little form that's, I think, 8 questions. And then the city offers seeds and they offer soil if necessary. There's not this huge process that makes it pretty much impossible for, like, there's a little verge I would adopt, but I can't because I'm not going to create a community garden. And just events. And so supporting, so if we want to run an event, or maybe the city will sponsor an event, but one of the ones that is the concept of an edible trail, which could be either, like, right now there's a community garden day, which promotes going across to different community gardens on that day. Some cities are doing that as an edible trail, which is a combination of local foods, so restaurants that serve local food, yards that have converted themselves in community gardens. Others are doing it in a more permanent fashion. So imagine if K&P Trail had all along the trail things like Saskatoon berries, berry bushes, maybe some apple trees in places where people would care for the apple trees because they need more care. And then that would encourage more people out. So that would be another way in saying not doing the traditional landscaping and say, hey, community, do you want to help, do you want our support to do something different here?
Thank you very much for your rich presentation. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot.
It is, Derek can share it, it's just on Google Drive, and there is links in the notes section.
Excellent, thanks. I do have one more question.
Just one second. Derek, did you not already share that information with members of the committee?
That's correct. So the presentations are on the U Drive in the folder where the agenda is.
Okay, I did remember that. Okay, excellent. Yeah, you just jogged my memory. Do you, so my other question was, do you include the Indigenous community? And I'm sure they have a lot of local experience and also knowledge that would be great with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This may be a really great opportunity as well.
Yeah, we're trying to increase our ties with that. At Lakeside, there's someone who comes out every year and does a Three Sisters Guild workshop. And unfortunately, she's gone up to take on an elder role in Northern Ontario. But there is with the Cassie group. So we need to find more partners in that community. So it's intention, but it's not there yet.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Osterhoff, you're up next.
Thank you for your presentation. Enjoyed that. That went fast. But I think what my colleague was asking too is the time is now. We hear you, and all that you've presented resonates with me, and I think with all of us. And so we don't want to lose you, I'm saying. We want to stay in touch with you. And I feel like saying, how can we not drop the ball? How can we keep this moving forward? And I know, for example, I am rural, and I do know that a lot of the solutions to this, I think you're absolutely right. The nature is our ally, and it's a great line, and it's very true. And so what I want to ask you is to stay in touch with us. Let us, all the individual, whatever, and see how we can come to a point where we can be instruments of change. So, because if you just say do this and do this, it may not happen. But we're all about changing the bylaws, I believe, and we want to work with that and be successful. So, it's not just your group, but you have great ideas, and this is something to move forward with. So I want to thank you, and I want you to see that we want to partner with you on that.
Okay, super. And we are partnering with other groups, too, as part of this. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Osanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for the presentation. If you could go to slide 39, that's the one on the polyculture hydro seeding. And I just wonder, like it says that it's basically like a prototype experiment for the Oak Street Community Garden. And verge, is that the boulevard between the sidewalk and the road? Like, can you explain what that is and what type of seeds? Like if it's polyculture hydro seeding, is that like vegetable seeds or is that pollinator seeding? And what does that all mean?
Okay, so right now we are going back and forth around this one. So we met with the city, I think operations, Mark, a really lovely guy on site a few days ago. And he was very receptive to not planting grass. So the orchard is going in and the trail is being built. So along this section of the community garden and the orchard, wanted to not have grass. So there was going to be seeding of grass along that area. Instead of grass, we asked for a meadow. And we would plant it ourselves and just to not hydroseed. Just came back to us saying still need 1 meter on each side that is seeded with normal grass. And so we want to go back, and the concern there is that large or tall things will flop on the path and make citizens unhappy. So another option is to go with really low mix, and the low mix could be considered, some of them are considered weeds right now in people's normal lawns, like Prunella vulgaris, which is a medicinal herb, which is actually a very good ground cover. There's sedges that are very low, clovers. There's different very low species like that could be seeded there instead. And that would still not, because normal grass is very invasive. It'll go down into the meadow, and it needs to be mowed regularly. This mix wouldn't. Or another option is an echo lawn, they call it, which it gets a maximum of 3-4 inches high, and it looks like a flowing carpet. And it doesn't need to be mowed if you don't mind it looking like a little flowing carpet. So an alternative to normal grass, which is going to turn brown in the summer anyway. So that's the mix that we're asking, can we do? And it's just permission to do it. It's not even for the city to fund it. It's permission to not have grass hydroseeded. And the commitment of Oak Street to care for it.
Yeah, that's a good explanation before, so I just learned something new. Thanks.
Yeah, so the grass right now is monoculture. Monoculture is never healthy. Polyculture is could be some more native or less aggressive grasses and sedges and other plants.
All right, thank you. And my second question is, for then the pit are 2 slides above it, so 37 and 36. So were these, I know that one's in my district, were the other pictures of front lawn gardens, would you say they were all sort of like around downtown, around here, or were they all over the place? Where were those pictures taken?
I would say the suburbs are the most challenging, right? I'm out in the suburbs and I was just in despair being out there. This one is in my neighborhood, and there's only maybe 3 of us that have completely converted our front lawns out there. So most of them are in the central area. There are some interesting ones over near the senior center in that area of town. But it's still pretty limited in the more outlying. And I think it's partly the larger lawns. I know people driving by my yard will stop and talk, and they kind of like the idea, but they find it intimidating, which is why, as master gardeners, we're building up the support to help them say, okay, we can help you do this. We know it's hard, like a big intimidating thing to start, but. And then I guess the city featuring them as well and saying, hey, look, we want you guys doing this. Having the city, that's just the city's support saying, and maybe linking from the city page to the wildscaping say, hey, there is an option and there is support for you guys.
Okay, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. And a couple, I'm happy to hear your edible trees are soon to be planted. Edible trees actually is a motion that passed unanimously at council 6 or 7 years ago. And we also just passed, thankfully, roadside wildflowers for boulevards, a pilot study along Sir John A. For next summer. Hopefully, it will prove a success. Are you aware of either of those things that council have passed unanimously?
Well, I know the edible policy because we're taking advantage of it for Lakeside, and I'm helping with Oak Street as well. I was not aware that you had passed one for the Wildside version on Sir John A., so that's great to hear. Yeah.
And I appreciate your recommendation to look at bylaws and noise bylaws and yard bylaws. Are there some specific bylaws you've looked at that you would like to make recommendations to this committee to consider? And I ask that because I have a neighbor who received
Complaint.
a threatening notice for what I thought was quite a beautiful perennial garden.
There are examples of natural landscape bylaws out there. There are different formats different cities have taken. Some of like permission, which to me seems like a whole lot of admin burden, versus a bylaw that just says a natural landscape and defines what that is, so that it doesn't. I know there's concern about weeds, just a weed lawn. I think some education of bylaw offices would be good, and maybe some content that we could help with to give to neighbors that might be complaining about it, because this goes to education in that the people that are used to those monoculture lawns are going to be concerned. So I think there's a combination. So I can point you to some bylaws that are out there as examples of natural ones. But
Thank
yeah.
you. I look forward to that. An excellent present.
Thank you.
Okay, I actually have a question, because you did say, you brought it up twice, and to me, it may be one of the areas where a new bylaw would be easily implemented and also very beneficial. So I would like you to talk more about the two-stroke engines and the reason that your claim, which I agree with, that it is extremely polluting, even though it's a small engine, as much as a large vehicle going coast to coast. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more of the technical reason for that.
Oh, I don't remember the technical reasons for that. They've got no controls on. They're very old technology, the type of engine that they are, and so I don't know much more than that. I know some cities have banned them. Montreal has been phasing them out. Washington had a huge campaign to ban them, and I know they actually cause ear damage. The blowers, but it's like it's an old technology that's not been monitored because it's a small engine, but I don't know the details.
Well, what I read recently is part of the emission is in aerosol form from these engines, because they have a very simple setup, very few moving parts, and so some of the fuel just shoots out the exhaust unignited, and so it's aerosol fuel going into the atmosphere as well, which is even more detrimental than the exhaust. So that combination, but for that reason, anyways, I will look into that one item myself and consult with colleagues and see if maybe either a ban or a regulation regarding two-stroke engines needs to be looked at, and just ask that you keep an eye on this committee's agendas to see if maybe something comes forward in the future, and then you could come and tell us some more about it. Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. So our next delegation also, I believe, has a presentation on the screen. Astrid Mushala is talking to us about supporting green infrastructure and the Canadian Organic Land Care Standard.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here, and it feels kind of sneaky. I'm really tall, so I have to change the. It feels kind of sneaky that two delegations on the same subject, more or less. We're colleagues, and I'm here to talk about the bigger picture and how we can do more at a city level. I'm a landscaper, I'm a certified organic land care professional, and I work with 3 organizations, nonprofits: Regeneration Canada, SOL, the Organic Land Care, Society of Organic Urban Land Care, and Canadian Organic Growers. What we all have in common is a mission to work with nature, not against it, in a sustainable but even a regenerative way. Sustainable is maintaining where we're at. That's not good enough. We need to ramp it up, bring down more carbon. This, unfortunately, on my screen is impossible to see, but I'm here to address nature as our living green infrastructure. Years ago, we didn't even talk about it. We didn't even recognize it. We didn't put value to it. Now we do. Green Infrastructure Ontario is a large organization communities are belonging to, and these are the reasons why we need to take care of our living green infrastructure. We are surrounded by these problems every day, every year, and it's just increasing. The climate, and mentioning climate crisis is threatening our land ecosystems and food systems. Many organizations and people are working on how to reverse this so that land use is regenerative and sustains ecosystems, sequestering the atmospheric carbon at the same time, which is driving planetary heating. Regenerative agriculture is actually showing us how drawing down carbon from the atmosphere works. And these advances in thinking and approaches to soil and land care can be applied to horticulture and urban settings. And in my work with many municipalities and companies, homeowners, we are seeing these approaches, practices work because the standard, the organic land care standard, has been in place since 2001. It's in its 7th edition. Just to review, look at modern development processes since World War II. These large piles of topsoil really are compacted subsoil. They're not very efficient. They're not really living soils. They're degraded topsoils, and they're not doing the job of what we need our landscapes to do. It's not enough where we're at today. What's expected of this site? It's going to be graded topsoil, typically 4 to 6 inches added to these landscapes, and then the homeowner is left to deal with it for a lifetime. You cannot support trees. This planting site contains compacted fill, A-gravel screenings, concrete washout, anaerobic topsoil, which is what those piles are, 1 to 2% organic matter. Typically, a healthy soil is 5 to 8%. Compaction levels are approaching crazy levels. This is our present topsoil specification in reality in this province. Planting, well, what is the correct tree for this site? I see incorrect planting of trees all the time in these situations. The truth is, maybe no tree is suitable for many sites, including this one. And what will the contribution of these trees be in 40 years? Well, they won't be alive. The average city tree is between 12 and 17 years. Very costly. Look at what we're doing. We're counting on these trees for future benefits, such as stormwater management, but these trees, 40 years old, they've caused a lot of infrastructure damage to the sidewalks. Are these trees going to survive? Not at all. For trees to provide these benefits, they require sufficient soil volume, soil quality to allow them to reach to maturity. The same benefits and requirements apply to all turf and other plants also. Organic matter here is the key to a fully functional soil. My point to all of this is that it's easier to implement higher standards for all future development than to try and fix the past. Substantial changes to urban forest and soil management best practices are required to ensure the natural functions of soil and vegetation are included in future developments. But it doesn't mean we cannot fix certain problem areas. There are other ways to get around these problem areas. Enter organic land care and ecological approaches, as my colleague Joyce pointed out. Many of these approaches, what we're calling lovingly here now in Kingston, this movement of wildscaping, will be very effective in some of these challenging places. Enter regenerative practices. The aim is to increase and protect organic matter. The simple truth is green infrastructure depends on vegetation, which depends on soil, but actually depends on the organic matter. So green infrastructure equals organic matter. And it's all because of this soil food web. It's an interconnected cyclical loop where everything is based on the soil microbes that are being fed by the plants and being fed through the food chain and back, a living soil is what brings down carbon from the atmosphere. So we can solve several problems at once using the same practices to restore soil carbon. I don't want to talk about that. There's no cookie cutter approach when we're looking at organic land care. You do have this presentation available to you. What can we do? Well, sustainable urban forests, trees that are growing in their native communities like we see in nature, encourage industrial and business landowners to do more naturalized landscaping, protect private trees by requiring private landowners to apply for a permit to take down trees of a certain size. We can eliminate or reduce synthetic fertilizers. These are inputs that are highly costly to the city, and we don't need them if we manage our soils properly. There are more best practices. This is from the City of Toronto, the Preserving and Restoring Healthy Soil Best Practices. What's next? Well, let's adopt organic land care principles. The Organic Land Care Standard is free on site, on the website. I would love to leave a copy for this committee. What's next? I think we should start small, designating 1 to 2 park spaces. I've just learned about Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard. That's wonderful. Maybe we can do some more. Training is really needed. This is a new way of thinking. If we are looking at improving our soils, we need to look at soil differently. It's not inert, it's not chemical, it's not just physical, it's biological. There's the organic horticulture specialists that many municipalities are sending park staff to. They can do it online, they can do it in the classroom. Kingston is offering a course in January. It's 14 weeks, it's a credit course, and it's very much a foundation course for all organic land care practices. Sending city staff to the Ontario
You're running out of
Urban Forest Conference. Okay, and
go ahead.
I'm running out. Can I conclude then? Thank
You're
you.
at 7.5 minutes.
So, okay, so here's my point. Indigenous knowledge, leadership, and practices with their millennia of ecosystem experience and understanding will be critical to long-term solutions. And some of the change that has to happen now is about ecosystems, moving from an extractive relationship to a reciprocal one, working with nature rather than against it. Thank you for letting me squeeze that in.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. I'm going to the Urban Forest Conference that you mentioned. I'm looking forward to that. I guess, are you aware of the motion that was passed at council recommended by this committee for the naturalization component of Bell Park, and that over 76% of that will be naturalized, what was a former golf course? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that. I'm really happy to would be interested to learn what the approach will be, for sure, because I think there are a lot of resources, and obviously you have them at their fingertips. But for planning foundational document, the Organic Land Care Standard is really what I think is the guiding principle that can lead us through all of these developments, and that's what I wanted to bring tonight.
And just a quick question, since you're a professional. Williamsville is going through a lot of development right now. That's my district. And a lot of the landscaping seems to be going the way of trees in landscape boxes. Is that a viable option for landscaping along a busy roadway?
There's a lot of technology, trees in boxes. It's expensive. Those trees will never live out their lifespan, not even close. That is the reality of it. But we want trees, and we want trees in very tight quarters. So in certain situations, that's what we're dealing with, and there's no way around it. It's just like a farmer wanting an orchard for fruit production. They prune those trees in such a way that is actually very harmful to those trees. Those trees will never live out their lifespan, but they're there to produce fruit for a short time, for an intensive time, and then new trees get planted. So the reality is sometimes it's difficult, and these technologies are really helping us put trees in very difficult spaces. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Osterhoff.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Again, it's excellent. There's a lot there. I know you can go on for a while. So if there is anything else you wanted to say, I would like to know what that is. And the one thing that comes to my mind a lot is even as my own family embarks on that journey of making organic land care, and I live in the country, but I'm less and less concerned about a manicured lawn, but much more concerned about birds and butterflies and nature, and really trying to put it in practice. But many people are, we can only be good at so many things, and you can leave us in the dust very quickly with your level of knowledge. So is there going to be not just courses, but could you put on seminars and training, or what do you call education for the common people to do something, to educate, further us and get us along that pathway to benefit our community? How could that happen?
Thank you for your questions and comments. I appreciate that. And as a master gardener like Joyce, that's one of our missions, is to provide education to the community at large. And my specialty is soil health. And so every opportunity we get, we're doing that. What I would love to see, though, is on a more professional basis, perhaps with parks people, having lunch and learns, or choosing landscapes where we can highlight and just start spreading the word and looking at best practice. What did we try here? What did we try at Bell Park, or are we trying it in the Boulevard? How can we apply that to other landscapes? These are very brief but powerful moments that we can have if they're more organized. I know they happen in different cities. One thing I'd like to point out, though, when you said, is there anything else I'd like to say? The word organic scares a lot of people, and sometimes we say ecological land care, or we have ecological landscape design, ecological approaches to landscape maintenance. The word ecological seems to be more trendy, especially in Ontario, but the word organic is legislated. We do have standards, and it does mean a lot, and that's what I think is the missing piece for a lot of people. We just don't understand what that actually means and how it differs from conventional land care. So that's the education piece. But of course, a home gardener who wants a pretty garden isn't going to listen to me talk about those things. But it is an important distinction to make on the ground for those of us who are working in that way.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the question. So when we were talking about, for instance, the soil, and it's not very good to grow trees in, like in new subdivisions, that sort of thing. I know that the Toronto Star a few years ago, they had a lot of articles about that, and I think the restriction was the building code, like the builders will build to the building code and they don't have to change the type of soil that is there. Do you know of any cities right now that are doing it right? That
Mississauga.
We should.
Mississauga is sort
Mississauga?
of
Okay.
leading the charge, more or less. Victoria, Barrie, those are the most progressive communities right now.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff happening in the GTA because growth is going crazy. And so this is a very important subject. But Mississauga has really invested in going back to basics and fundamental principles here. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's great. And then with Mississauga, that's the city of Mississauga and
Peel region.
in Peel region. Yeah. How did they get there? Was it Master Gardeners, do you know, that really led the charge?
Well, Master Gardeners so much as Organic Land Care, the Society of Organic Urban Land Care has been doing work, and fortunately, one of the leaders in the city of Toronto in the innovation office with Parks Toronto did do the organic horticulture specialist course, and she just ran with it and started putting teams together. And now they even have, because it's a union environment, they even have created an exam for those union parks employees who want to work more ecologically, more organically. They have to prepare to write an exam which sets them apart as a distinct specialty of horticulture or gardening. So lead hand gardeners, they can apply to do this exam, and so the city has been building teams like that, and the same has been happening in Mississauga.
Councillor Doherty.
Here and through you. Just following up what Councillor Oosterhoff was mentioning, the opportunity for training for people. Is there like a master gardener collective in town? I guess it's one of those. I have a few questions, but that's one. Like, is there a network and like a website where people who know nothing about gardening could go to and say, these are the people I may contact to get more information?
Essentially, it's the Society of Organic Urban Land Care website that has regional forums. The master gardeners are really a development through the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs to work directly with homeowners in place of extension office work that used to happen in the field. And so we're trained to work with homeowners and home landscapes, but this is above and beyond. Organic land care at this level is a real specialty, and the Society of Organic Urban Land Care is really the hub. And the website is becoming much more educational in nature. There are resources. That's one of the biggest challenges to all towns and cities across Canada, is where to source materials that will meet the specifications that we need to support the kinds of landscapes we're talking about. And so I was just spending half a day with Tomlinson and talking about this very issue. Where all of us working in this area are really aware of the shortfalls and what we need to do better, but unless there is a demand on the end user, from the end user, we're not going to change these things. And so my work as a professional, I find I'm doing at least 60% education in my work. So I would suggest the Society of Organic Urban Land Care. It's organiclandcare.ca website.
Okay, I have a question. This is a very big thing that you're talking about. It is requires a certain level of knowledge of biology that perhaps the average citizen will never be able to aspire to, and that may be what you're struggling with. I know what you mean when I talk about, as a nurse, when I talk with patients about health issues, sometimes, you got to keep it really simple because they don't have the background that I have. So, but that's not the basis of my question. I have a very specific question. So, you may or may not know Kingston, in its strategic plan in 2015, we implemented an initiative called Double the Tree Canopy by 2025. So in 2015, they did a count of the urban trees on city property, and the idea was to plant that many again by 2025. So 10 years to plant roughly 30,000 trees, according to the count that they did. So that's the way it was interpreted. It was very general. I wrote it, so it was written generally on purpose, and I'm happy that staff is working in that direction. So we have here several members of senior staff that are directly involved with that work and that planning. And I would ask, we're almost at the halfway point. It seems from your presentation that if we really wanted to double the canopy, we're losing a lot of trees based on the poor quality of the soil that they're being planted in. And my question is, what specifically do you have to say to the senior staff here present to help them achieve that goal by 2025, we were almost halfway there, do we look at the soil? Do we look at changing the specific guidelines about what soil they have to put down, and then whatever trees get planted have a better chance? Is that what you would say? Like, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tree planting in and of itself, there are right ways to do it and wrong ways. And I see contractors all the time being paid by the unit and not by the quality of the tree planting. So a tree gets plunked in a hole that is just barely big enough to hold its root ball. It's in a cage. The cage is not removed. The burlap, if there's burlap, the burlap's not removed. There's maybe an inch or less between the hole and the root ball, and then it's mounded up like a volcano with mulch. This is the absolute wrong way to plant a tree, and there's going to be guaranteed nothing but trouble from that. So I don't know how the trees are being planted. I would hope not like that, but unfortunately I see that too often. So it's not just the method, but also we all know about right place, right plant, choosing the right trees, but trees grow in communities. They grow in the taller, we're missing the really tall, big trees in our canopies. And I looked at the count, we are woefully low on oak trees in the city, for example. We need that green corridor across the country, and it's through the big trees. So we're missing those big trees. But those trees often live with understory trees that work together with them in sourcing fertility, nutrients, macro and micronutrients. They share water, they share disease suppression, and so the small understory trees are missing, and then the shrub trees are missing. So really, trees should be planted in islands and not as isolated beings alone in the world to fend for themselves, and we ask so much of them.
So improve the quality of the soil, but also through legislation, but also change the practice of sort of one tree every 55 feet or whatever the yard frontage is, and go more into clustering the trees so that they can actually support each other.
Like islands.
Which we probably do in parks, but even in parks we're probably spacing them out quite a bit. So closer together.
Yeah.
And different types, like you say, the understory and
Yeah.
and the shrubs and everything. So more mimicking the natural environment that we cut.
Yeah, so maples are very classically growing in that kind of environment, whereas an oak is more of a solitary, lone savanna type. Well, our white oaks and our red oaks are typically. There are lots of other oaks that aren't like that. But so yeah, it's the way these landscapes are planted. It will definitely save in work and expense down the road. It pays. It just pays.
Perhaps we can have the accompanying Councillor Neal on that trip to the urban conference to maybe get a member of staff to at least get that information as well. We can't go on all night, unfortunately, so I guess we'll have to leave it there. But thank you very much. We did learn something today, and hopefully you'll stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Well, the good news is there is really only 2 items of business, so that's where we are now. We will move to 7A, which is the winter maintenance policy. There's a report from Transportation and Public Works, and there's also a recommendation for our consideration. And if passed, it will go to council. So we'll ask staff to introduce the report, and then we'll go to this item.
Thank you to the chair. This report is to update the Public Works winter maintenance policy. The policy outlines the winter maintenance service levels for the various winter maintenance activities that Public Works performs. While this policy is a standalone city policy, it is based on the Ontario Minimum Maintenance Standards regulations under the Municipal Act, which establishes maintenance standards for municipal roadways in Ontario. Many of the maintenance service levels are based on road classification, which is determined by the speed limit of the roadway as well as the traffic volumes, where a Class 1 or Class 2 road would receive a higher level of service than Class 3, 4, 5, 6. The city does not have a Class 1, but we have several Class 2s, and we have every other Class 2 to 6. The previous versions of the policy and the minimum maintenance standard included items like winter roadway patrol to observe road conditions during and prior to a winter storm, weather monitoring, so Public Works has a value-added weather service to provide regular, consistent, and in-depth forecasts, as well as roadway snow accumulation management and ice formation on roadways. The recent update to the minimum maintenance standards took a big swing at the winter maintenance activities that are required if you adopt the minimum maintenance standards. And I'll just touch on some of the key points, but there is an option now available to the city, so Public Works can declare a significant weather event. So the levels of service are based on your average or above average winter storm event, but oftentimes we experience storms that are significantly more snow accumulation or freezing rain than an average or slightly above average storm. So the declaration allows us to declare the significant weather event, which essentially puts a pause on the time response to the levels of service. It doesn't mean that we stop performing the maintenance activities, we still do that. And then at the end of the storm event, we would release the declaration and the times would kick in for level of service response. The minimum maintenance standards also includes cycle lane, snow removal, and ice conditions. Public Works has performed maintenance on cycle lanes in the past, but this policy change identifies specific standards that we will follow for cycle lanes in the city. And the minimum maintenance standards, another big change that was implemented was snow accumulation and icy sidewalks, which should have very little impact on the city as our policy has included sidewalk maintenance in the winter for over 15 years. The standards in the minimum maintenance standards for sidewalks pretty much mirror what the city standards have been for a long period of time. So again, we don't anticipate much of an impact to us on that regard. Another addition is sidewalk winter patrol, which is similar to the previous requirement for roadway patrol in the winter. So Public Works has determined some representative sidewalks that we would drive on the adjacent roadway. We would inspect the sidewalks, which would give us an indication of what we're experiencing on those sidewalks. We probably are experiencing on many sidewalks in that neighborhood, and that would allow us to make decisions on responses for sidewalk plows, for plowing, salting, or sanding. So essentially, that's my brief on the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I did read this report with interest because there is some new things here, and hopefully we can at least get our heads around all the new items with our questions. We'll go to members of the committee. After that, members of the public will also have a chance to ask questions. Go ahead, Councillor Ostroff.
Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Bill. It's always good to hear this. And I guess the context of my questions is not anything specific. I've experienced 2 winters as a counselor, and I've really appreciated the, maybe it's new, maybe it's not, the interaction we get to have with, I think it was you, but maybe it'll be someone else now, giving us updates and progress reports. And I found it very informative and educational about how we were handling our road conditions. And I guess one question is that going to continue? Then the rural, is there something within here embedded that, is this a big change for you, is my second question, for roads? Is there something in here, am I hearing, what I think I'm hearing is that you will have different priorities at different times, so that could mean I can expect less, like how you'd get calls at different times, right, of roads that seem to have been forgotten. And in the countryside, that's quite quite a lot, in my opinion, but maybe not so bad, but it certainly sounds like a lot sometimes. So I guess I'm wondering if you can sort of address that a little bit. Will you be able to say, well, we haven't gotten to those roads because of this proclamation of a weather system or something like that? So, which is part of the fact. I realize we have priorities. So I guess my context is most of all my view and my position as a councillor and how I hear from the residents and what can we expect for that level of care, and is this maybe just sort of still status quo but with a few more details?
Yes, through the chair. Firstly, yes, we do plan to continue the council updates for storm events during storms, just to provide some sort of indication of where we at with our storm response. And as far as road winter maintenance, there is no change. There's been no change to the road classifications, so our priorities are still the same. Oftentimes we get similar feedback from the public. When's my road going to be completed? Because the road that I drive out wasn't plowed, but when I get to a main road, it is. But that all comes down to the road classification system and the prioritization. So, but to answer your question, there is no change. It's basically status quo for roads.
Thanks. That's good to hear. I mean, I know that I do understand and completely read that the best efforts are made. So that's an understood. So we'll still have the GPS, and you'll be able to find out, or your staff will be able to find out if for somehow they just forgot a road, and they'll get back there. That all just continues as good management.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that we don't miss roads. It absolutely happens. But we do have GPS to monitor those situations, and we try to get back to those areas as quick as possible.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, I have a bunch of questions. Thanks for the report. It was really appeals. I also appreciate keeping to the minimum maintenance standard, because I think the minimum standard is not something that we should aim for. But in the new regulations coming down the line, you mentioned that sidewalk monitoring is such a new thing. And so patrolling the sidewalks, are there some, can you explain more what the rules and regulations are? Because I would imagine our residents are probably very good patrollers of sidewalks and would communicate with us regarding that. I'm not saying that that's sufficient enough, but how do that kind of feedback from people using the sidewalks, how does that count?
Through you, the chair. So yeah, that is a challenging change to the minimum maintenance standards. The regulation has been called the minimum maintenance standards since its inception. This revision is only minimum maintenance standards by title. Every reference in the document is maintenance standards. I think the committee that put that together has realized that it's not necessarily a minimum standard, and often the City of Kingston standard is above that. And in actuality, in practice, we find that we are above that standard quite regularly. Yes, calls from the public for sidewalk or roadway or pathway maintenance are common during the winter, especially during a significant snow accumulation. But oftentimes, by the time that call comes through, it's too late for the operation in that neighborhood. So the road or the sidewalk patrol should help us identify situations that we may not have been aware of in the case where maybe a sidewalk was missed. Where there will be value for public safety will be after a storm event and we've plowed and perhaps somebody's placed snow on the sidewalk after the plows went by and we're not aware of that. Or late winter season where we have a warm day and some snow melts and water's on the sidewalk and freezes at night. So this patrol mechanism should allow us to monitor and capture a lot of those and then assign resources.
And do we keep tab of how often, for example, do we have data from last year where we could anticipate icing of sidewalks for this year coming, for example?
I would have to say, unfortunately, no. every winter is a little different, every storm's a little different. So we're prepared with our materials and our equipment, and patrol is just an opportunity to have a competent person take a look at what's the existing conditions are, document that, and then report that for response if needed.
Can I have a few more questions? Is that okay? Thanks. And do we prioritize around schools and certain areas, certain businesses?
So our sidewalk prioritization is based on sidewalks with high pedestrian traffic or sidewalks adjacent to arterial roads. There's no specific prioritization around schools. There's 50-some schools in the city, and it's a challenge to pick which school you prioritize. I would say, without speaking for another department, but I know through Active Transportation Master Plan, we are looking for active routes to school, and that'll be included in that discussion and will be winter maintenance.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. A couple questions. So first one, it's referenced throughout the report, but I just don't know if I'm not making the connection or what the challenge is for me. But anyway, so we have the standards for sidewalks, walkways, and then the standards for bus stops. Am I correct that the bus stops are not changed by the ministry standards? That those are based on, that there isn't a change there?
Yes, the regulation has no mention of bus stop winter maintenance. So bus stop winter maintenance is solely a City of Kingston Public Works winter maintenance policy.
So those levels it does say that those are the public works levels that are determined here. And then are they related to the sidewalk clearing in the area? I'm just curious, like in practice, how that works.
So we review that, the best we can. Sidewalks are hand shoveled, or we use a piece of equipment like a small loader. Sidewalk plows travel, point to point, block to block, much quicker than a crew can move bus stop to bus stop. So it's unfortunate we can't necessarily time every bus stop clearing with the adjacent sidewalk clearing, but it is certainly a factor when we look at the routes.
Okay. And just one more question. So the walkway section, does this include, like I know we've talked, and a number of us heard in the suburban areas of the city that there are walkways that are not, like they're not, where they wouldn't be high pedestrian routes, but they are connectors, so they connect one little cluster of houses or subdivision to another. Those kinds of walkways, where are they prioritized? And well, essentially, are they going to be done at some point? Because I think what I've heard is that in the past they weren't maintained by the city, and I'm just not sure where we are with maintaining overall maintenance of those walkways that are like not very high pedestrian use.
Right, so after the high pedestrian use priorities, our operation breaks into zones, and we'd have snow plows plowing all the sidewalks in that neighborhood, and that would include the connecting walkways, as long as the walkway is able to be plowed with a sidewalk plow. They kind of look small till you get beside them. They are fair size, and there's some walkways that just don't have the width to allow a plow to travel down the walkway, but if they do, they are included with the sidewalk clearing.
One last one then. So then for those that don't meet that width requirement, then are they, so we're not currently maintaining them, but if there was a concern, if a resident had a concern, what should we do? Should we essentially say they won't be maintained because the equipment doesn't fit there? Or like, this is more a question for Commissioner Kidd, I'm sure as well, but like, if we're not currently doing that, is there any plan to do that in the future?
So yeah, that's something we consider for sure. We're also looking at other equipment that could be purchased to plow those walkways. When a sidewalk machine is assigned to a route, it's important that it can plow the whole route. So we are considering what can be done in the future, but there are currently walkways that just are not maintained in the wintertime, similar to some sidewalks that may dead end where they don't have a destination point. So we do have those conditions where they're just simply not maintained. But we certainly want to consider those in the future. I don't have a plan I can share with you today on those.
Councillor Senek.
Through the chair, just to supplement Bill's response to that, that's correct. So where we have walkways that we're currently not maintaining, there is no plan at this time to begin maintenance on them. And as he's indicated, it's usually, they're either not suitable for mechanical equipment, and we don't have the resources to go down and hand bomb them, or they dead end someplace like at a school. And we've got a few of those in the West End neighborhoods. And so ideally, over the course of the active walk to school planning that is being done through the transportation group, those routes would be identified. And there still may be some that we simply can't maintain during the winter, but we're hoping to identify safe routes to school. And as Bill has indicated, we will incorporate winter maintenance standards into those routes.
This is a very tiny little question. I wonder if, so currently some of those routes are being maintained by residents who go out as a good Samaritan and clean it with a shovel or something like that. Would it make sense for us to incorporate, like find a way to recognize that or encourage that in the future, I guess, as part of, if it's already happening, I'm just curious how we might.
Through the chair, we do have quite a few spaces like that where they're maintained. Sometimes we only find out about them when somebody is no longer able to do it, and then the maintenance on them stops, sadly. And we get the same thing with some boulevard cutting and things like that. But we don't have a formal program to be able to recognize them. But certainly, anytime we do become aware, we always, if we're out and about, we're always talking to residents in the area, and we are grateful. It would be a really nice world if everybody chipped in and did their part.
Councillor Senek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So building on what Councillor Holland was just saying, it is true that there's walkways that I heard about during the election, and then when I sat down with you, Mr. Lennon, in December, like we went over some of them. I think it would be good for us as councillors to get a list of which walkways, like connectors, can't be maintained, so that we can go back to the residents, like Crestwood Avenue, Crestwood Crescent, Woodside Drive, whichever ones, and all the ones that Councillor Holland obviously has concerns about, and all the districts probably, if we could get a list so that we could then present that, because winter's coming up. And the excuse last year was that it was just after the election and we still had like so many things on the go. But this winter, like we really have to go back and follow up with everybody. And if we could present this list and give the reasons, like you were saying, because if they're just not wide enough for mechanical means, then at least the expectation management's not there. Because what we heard during the election is that the city's not doing it, right? And maybe there's a walkway that the city should be doing that's just been overlooked and that is wide enough for the city to do. But it would be good to have this list.
Through the chair, so yes, that is something that we identified. Public Works this summer did a complete inventory on all the walkways in the city. So we now have data on the width, length, types of surface, because we also, it's difficult to plow a gravel surface walkway. So now we have that data and we're compiling the list of walkways and sidewalks where they might dead end or there might be various reasons why we can't actually plow it. I wouldn't want to suggest that we'll have it available before the start of the winter, but we are actively working on it right now.
Thank you. My next question is, I also heard during the election on a few streets right in the district that we're always the last street to be done. So I'm just wondering if Public Works, like for the zones that are out there, do you always start with the same street and always end with the the last street. So last year, are all the same streets going to be started on first, and the streets that were last to be done last year will be last this year? Or can Public Works change it up so that a street doesn't feel like they're always the last street? Once the arterials are done, once the bus stops are done, right? So I'm just talking about the crescents and the courts. You know, can Public Works change it up?
Through the chair, yes, that's a practical thing to do. Our plow routes are a map, and the plow operator would start at the closest point from where they're coming from, whether it's City Yard or our Creekford Yard. But we have received concerns about that, so our winter maintenance training is now telling our operators that if you start here, it's also important the next storm to maybe start in the other end of that zone or on that route. So we do try and monitor that, but it's certainly in the training now. But our operators, like many, are creatures of habit, and there are reasons for starting at certain points versus others, just for efficiencies. But yeah, we are looking at that as well.
I know that for the construction that right now is being done in front of Lancaster Drive, that I've already been starting to get a lot of emails of concerns from residents looking at how the snow is going to be removed in front of the two schools on Lancaster Drive, Lancaster Public School and Mother Teresa. So I just wanted to make the point, since we're talking about the snow removal plan, that people are going to be watching that really carefully. And what planning department told me to tell the people, which I have, is that, you know, when the planning application went through, it gets circulated to all the departments, one being Public Works, and they can, you know, they assured planning department that there was a snow removal plan in place. I just wanted to raise that like over the last week, I've already had 2 emails asking me how snow's going to be removed in front of there. So that's just a warning. I have a question about if it's really true. Is the first snowfall of the year that's the most slippery? Is that what we find? Because the roads are still kind of warm from like the summer and ice freezes up mostly?
Through the chair, temperature, road temperature, so ground temperature and air temperature would play a factor in that. So if we get a wet snow and there's a reasonably warm ground temperature, the snow can pack onto the road surface quickly. Once the ground is frozen, that bond is less likely, but that's why we apply the anti-icing liquid on our arterial roads, especially early season, winter and late season, to try and avoid that situation. That can happen though.
Thank you. And my last question is just when, you know how we have the bylaw that's no parking on the roads from December 1st until April 1st. And some people have complained to us that, as you know, that's too excessive, that other cities say that like they can park on the roads as long as the city hasn't given an alert that there's a snowfall. If we looked at doing that, you wouldn't recommend it, right? Do you see?
That's subject, so I'll allow the question, but I don't want us to spend half an hour on that particular thing because it's not on the agenda.
I think I'll take that one through the chair. I do realize that that's a question that gets posed fairly regularly. It's not something we recommend. It's been brought before committee before when we were looking at the on-street programs. Other cities do have it. Usually we hear about Montreal and Ottawa primarily. We're continually trying to find ways to work with our residents in terms of on-street parking, whether it's summer or winter. And I think we're struggling right now, even with the non-winter program in terms of vehicles. And it seems to be a constant battle between neighbors with cars parked on their street and cars not parked on their street. And so at this particular time, that is not on our work plan to look at changing that bylaw.
Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I share concerns that Councillor Doherty expressed about snow removal not being a clear priority, or at least a level 2 priority around schools. My district has Rideau Public School, but many of my residents go to Winston Churchill, and the chair also shares those two schools. And the number of cars that drop kids off, and I know that we're trying to address that with our Walk to School program, but if I was a parent and there was no sidewalk that my child could walk on, I'd be driving them to school as well. Otherwise, the option is they're walking on the road. And I really strongly think that that should be a policy that we look at and review. I've had this conversation annually.
You need to ask Councillor Neal.
Yes, when this report's, and I'm wondering if the opportunity for you to review that policy.
Through the chair, again, we can review a policy, but that would be a significant shift. And the reason that the priorities are established the way they are is we look at the high volume sidewalks and sidewalks that are adjacent to the high volume roads. That's because that's the least safe place if you do have to take the road. So if you are on a residential local street and the sidewalk isn't cleared and you're forced to walk along the roadway, that's a safer situation than a higher speed, higher volume traffic road. So that would be one concern that we have. It does seem counterintuitive, and we don't disagree, but that's why we have finally an active transportation plan that has an implementation plan, and it is going to take a while, but everything in the active transportation plan is prioritizing that safe walk to school and neighborhood planning, and I think it's going to be through that process that we're going to be able to learn how we're going to be able to make it more safe for our children to get to school, to get across intersections, and to reduce some of the habit that has built over the years with parents driving their kids to school and dropping them off. And that's happening throughout the school year, not just in the wintertime.
And I'm glad you brought transportation in your comments. I'm curious about, and perhaps you can respond to, how do we have a commitment to plow bike lanes? Because increasingly people are using their bikes year-round. And how are we dealing with the bollards? Are they easily removed for snow removal? Or I know Hamilton removes them, puts them back in between storm situations. Could you comment on that?
So the bollards the technology used allows us to install anchors in the roadway, remove the bollards in the winter months, and then reinstall them into those anchors in the summer or in the spring, so that bike lanes can be plowed right to the curb line by the plow that's plowing the street. One of the challenges with bike lanes is there's a lot of streets with very limited snow storage between the curb and the sidewalk, or zero snow storage. So Public Works is looking at a plan to do more snow removal, physically removing the snow from the street in those cycle lanes, and that's included in that process is additional equipment in our 15-year capital plan to purchase the proper equipment to increase that snow removal.
Thank you. I know this will be the first year, so it'll be interesting to see how it's dealt with. Thank you.
So a little bit of a recap, just in the form of a question. You mentioned at the very beginning the minimum standards coming from the provincial legislative change, and then our policy is what we see here in Exhibit A. So I'm going to go through a couple of sections, and I'm just looking for a yes or no, if I could be wrong, about the sections that are new, like the new things. So going through, and this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just the things that I've noticed. So if it's not new, correct me, please. So on the second page, number 3, patrol and monitoring, we now have a sidewalk patrol, 3.3, which is new, is that correct? We've always had the role, but now we have sidewalk patrol for where we're monitoring the sidewalks, that's new?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and then for the new is the significant weather event declaration, that's also new?
That's correct.
Okay, and then over the page, number 6, bicycle lanes, we now have specific standards in those tables that you see there for bicycle lanes, that's new?
That's new as well, yes.
And we have, okay, that's all I noticed that was significant and new. There's probably other few minor things. Are there anything else significant in this policy for us to consider that is brand new?
No, those are the major changes to the policy. A lot of that maintenance work was previously performed by Public Works to some degree. This just formalizes a lot of our work and then sets clear standards.
Okay, great. So that gets us same page. So we know when we pass this, if we pass this, and recommend it to council, that it's with those new items added. I had a couple more minor questions. First one is the KMP trail and then the pathways through various parks, the paved pathways through parks, some of which are full 3-meter multi-use pathways, some are smaller. How do they fit into the sidewalk plowing priorities?
The trails and the multi-use path, we look at the multi-use path on Bath Road. We don't use a sidewalk plow for that. It's wide enough for a pickup truck with a plow. So we have several pickup trucks with plows that plow parking lots in some of our city parks that are open for the winter. And we've added the multi-use path to one of those routes. The existing trail system, like KP Trail, oftentimes it would be plowed with a sidewalk plow at 1.5 meters width. And then part of our storm cleanup, we would do a second pass and plow the width to 3 meters if that's the width of the trail.
And places like Victoria Park, City Park, that have the high pedestrian pathways going through the parks, are they also sort of on the list with the residential sidewalks, or part of a route, or how does that work?
So the main pathways through many of the parks, City Park, Victoria Park, are included in the sidewalk plow map, and the same priority as the adjacent sidewalks. Not every pathway in every park is plowed. Some are gravel and they wouldn't be plowed, but the main pathways through those parks are.
So sort of like what Councillor Holland was describing with these connectors that are, if citizens want them plowed, they're going to have to get their shovels out or their snow blowers, because I know even in City Park there's pathways that can't be plowed by a sidewalk plow, and usually aren't. My other question is about just general priorities. So we've got 3 tables in this, and only one is new, the one for bicycle lanes. So we have the road service standards, and I'm just talking about the time frame, which is the last column. So if I correct, so each of these is altered significantly because of the winter event declaration. That last column refers to the time frame after the end of the significant winter event, right? Which is something that we can declare. So if it snows for 24 hours, the event is it Environment Canada that says the snowfall warning is ended, and that's when the clock starts ticking for these tables?
Yes, so through the regulation, in order to declare a significant weather event, certain criteria have to be met, and that is a reference to Environment Canada's weather hazard list, which is significant, but it includes several winter type events, significant freezing rain, significant snow accumulation. So when Environment Canada issues that warning, that's a trigger where a municipality may, if they wish to, declare a significant winter event. And when that happens, then yes, the time frame in that column would then be put on pause until the end of the declaration, and then those times would kick in.
So that's sort of the implication of declaring the significant weather event from your standpoint is it gives you that time frame to get the operations underway, and you have these minimum standards with these time frames to comply. So on those time frames, you'll notice that the one for the roads is in descending order: 4 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, and then unmaintained. And then for the bike lanes, it's 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours unmaintained. So that's double the window. And then for sidewalks, it's 24, 48, and 72. So is that sort of a reflection? This is in the policy, but is that a reflection of the actual order that we do the winter control? Like we start with the roads, and the arterials are prioritized, and then the collectors. I know that there is sidewalk clearing underway before the road clearing is finished, but is there sort of a sequential nature of the operations? Like, does it start with the roads and then go to the sidewalks, then go to the bus shelters, or is that just the time frames to be like that, but it doesn't really reflect operations?
So our practice at the start of a storm is to assign plow trucks to roadways, sidewalks, sidewalk plows, as well as bus stops. So we'll have crews assigned to each of those at the start of the storm or when there's enough accumulation to warrant snow removal. So it's not a situation where we plow roads first and then we move to sidewalks. We're simultaneously performing winter maintenance and all of those, all the infrastructure really.
But there wouldn't be, and then the final question is, if this time frame expires, and there's, say, like, who is it that, I mean, obviously you strive to make the standards, but if the standards aren't met, what are the consequences?
We would measure that and we'd say we met X percentage of the winter storm events, we met our level of service. Our history in public works is that we're pretty close to 100%. The situations where we're not, it could include storm after storm. So if we haven't gone through all the roads or sidewalks and then another storm starts, then we basically look back to our priorities for arterials, sidewalks, roads, etc. And oftentimes in those cases, we haven't got to some of the cul-de-sacs or the sidewalks on some of those local roads. So in those cases, that's an overlapping storm. So we would identify it as we didn't meet the first storm service levels, but we had to restart our timing because of the next storm. So as far as consequences, it's more just for information purposes to allow us to determine what we need to do in the future to avoid missing those service levels.
Suppose if there was ever because the minimum standard wasn't met, that could be admissible as evidence in a lawsuit, but that's not something that you would see on the operations side, probably. Commissioner Kidd?
Mr. Chair, this is my sort of first venture into minimum maintenance standards. I've understood our winter policy for a few years because of the transit operations, but there's a couple of things that I think would be helpful if I clarified them. So you're absolutely correct. The origin of minimum maintenance standards were developed by the province many years ago when the province started to download highways. And municipalities were saying, how do we defend ourselves against claims? And so they created these standards, and that they're developed by a lot of lawyers, and there's insurance experts and municipalities that participate. And they're reviewed every 5 years. And the review of 5 years is generally based on claim experience that they look at and they go back to it. So the standards themselves were created essentially to say if a municipality follows these standards and has documented and demonstrates them, it does give a legal defense in a claim situation. Over the years, they've gotten significantly better as through experience and things like that. And so these time frames in the charts that you're looking at are right from the standards, and they indicate the time frame by which after the end of an event, so whatever the weather event is, that's the timeline by which you strive to have that service level completed. This time in the review, the new piece is the ability to declare a significant weather event. And that's the ability then for, if we have like a very lengthy storm and we can't get off the arterials or whatever, and if we can't meet these standards, it's the ability for us to communicate to the community that we're declaring a significant event. It is an opportunity to say to people, if you don't need to travel, use particular caution because we're not able to keep up. And then it's, as Bill has said, then it essentially pauses our obligation to meet these. And then the event declaration is repealed, and then we go back to trying to meet these timelines as we go. So in many ways, our operation does follow these, but it's not concurrent. They're overlapping things. But I think that's probably the biggest change. We had this ability last year. I don't believe we used it last year. Once we used it. So it just depends on the duration of the storm and the nature of the storm. But it does give us the ability to let the members of the public and people traveling through our area know that we have a significant event and we're not able to meet these levels, and therefore travel is more risky.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm sure the councilors here will know then if there's a significant event declared by the city, that's also a significant political event for us because we will be fielding the calls and the questions. Great. I feel like we've covered most of the report. Are there any other questions before we go to members of the public? Okay, members of the public have a chance to ask questions or make comment on the report and the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks to staff for the report and the answers, and to the committee for great research and questions. So I've got 11 questions. I'm not sure if we'll get through them all, but I'm going to write them up. So I'm going to start off by saying that I've noticed a significant improvement in city staff's work on winter maintenance control in the last few years. So praise for that. Thank you. You've got a lot of specifics in here, but I didn't see anything on precisely how you define the severity of the winter events, whether it's, say, minor, average, above average, or significant. Do you have a table that you've studied or come up with on that? Obviously, you've got a lot of winter complexities as to how the events can combine with each other or whatever, but say a certain amount of snow, is that significant or is it above average? Or so you see where I'm going on that. My father was a meteorologist for part of his career, so when I asked a weather question, he could answer it. So, okay. Next question. I know that in the past, you've had issues with the winter maintenance vehicles breaking down, right? It's going to happen. They get used a lot of skill to use them and so forth. And there's been a shortage of backups. So I'm wondering if you've addressed that shortage. Do you have backup vehicles standing by if the vehicles you're using are breaking down? Okay. Next question is, do you organize the citizen complaints by electoral district? I know there's been variance in district. I remember a few years ago, the area around Queen's campus was left for like a week or 10 days because there's nobody around campus. Queens did their part, but the areas close to campus were just left because, no students around. So a lot of complaints about that. How much contracting out does this department do over the course of an average winter? You have your staff able to handle certain things, then you contract out perhaps the rural areas or certain districts if you have major events happening. So do you chart that? Okay. Is this winter that's coming, is it going to be the first one under the new guidelines or the second one? It's not exactly clear in the report on that. LaSalle Causeway is a federal bridge, right? And I know in the past there's been issues on, say, where the city's maintenance ends on, say, the west end of the causeway and where the federal maintenance starts. So it's a bit of a narrow sidewalk there, and getting through there, like, it's entirely ice. I've seen it. So I'm just wondering if you've addressed that specifically. Next point I think is very significant. The downtown transfer point in the winter becomes very heavily used. People use buses more when the weather's bad. And there's a lot of buses going through there. There's a lot of people using the system, and there's a lot of sidewalk traffic and a lot of vehicle traffic, right? So I've seen snow piled up right next to bus stops, and it's a very narrow sidewalk there. And it's on a slope, and it's also quite slippery. So I'm wondering if you have looked at the downtown transfer point specifically and actually studied it to see if you can find ways to make that better, because it is important. Okay, let's just see.
1 minute left.
Okay, thanks. Just looking at on page 5, last paragraph, you say there's a new snowblower attachment was approved in the 2019 budget. This is for the bike lanes. So has that been acquired yet for this winter? Hoping it has. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to write up the other ones. But that's a good selection there, and looking forward to seeing the improved work shown in this winter's maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other members of the public, staff has a chance to respond to the questions. Of course, any questions outside the scope of the report are not necessarily obligatory. Go ahead.
Through the chair, so I'll do my best to answer every question asked. As far as fleet goes for backup vehicles, we have 29 road plow trucks, 16 sidewalk machines, and if we have the available staff resources to put somebody in each one of them, we will. In those situations, we don't have an active backup. If we don't have enough staff to fill all 29 plows, then there would be a plow available for a backup. We have a mechanic staff that work 24/7 when required to keep the equipment running, but plowing is tough on trucks and equipment. It's in the coldest weather conditions, and it is kind of a reality of what we do, but we do try and keep them maintained, serviced, and back on the road as quick as possible. As far as complaints from the public during the winter storm event, we would look at the nature of the complaint. If we know that we're in that neighborhood with our equipment, we'll look at our GPS technology, and if we know we're there or we're going to be on night shift, oftentimes a night shift could be through that neighborhood before we get the service request in the morning or before we get a chance to look at it. But in the cases where somebody says their street was missed or sidewalk was missed, that is a supervisor would put eyes on that and determine if additional resources are required. So hopefully that answers that question. As far as the minimum maintenance standard revision, it was revised in 2018. So this policy reflects those changes. But Public Works did practice those changes to that regulation last winter. There was a lot of things that we wanted to try to determine how we could meet some of those standard changes, and we were able to do that and then apply it to this policy moving forward. The LaSalle Causeway, although it is a federal jurisdiction, the city does plow the street, the road, and the sidewalk and cross the entire causeway. And then as far as the transfer point, yes, so during a heavy snow accumulation winter event, snow piles do collect on the sidewalk area or adjacent to bus stops. It is a priority. Around KGH, downtown transfer point, Market Square, are snow removal priorities when we move the blowers downtown to remove snow. We also have equipment that is dedicated to the downtown area, and that includes the transfer point. One of the challenges and one of the things we're mindful of is to not have equipment doing a lot of forward and reversing movements during peak times during the day. So most of that work happens at night. So you would potentially see snow piles during a storm or recently after a storm, but typically we would focus on clearing those out on the next night shift. And so hopefully that answers that question. As far as the snow blower goes, we have not received that snow blower, so we anticipate it being up. We won't have it for the start of winter. We do own 2 snow blowers, the city does. So our focus for cycle lanes will be using those blowers as well as our regular snow removal. So when we expand, we expect to be performing snow removal on night shift much more frequently than we have in the past, and that is to address the snow removal required for the cycle lane policy change. And then I'll just pass it over to Sheila for the contracting out question.
Mr. Chair, we contract the east side of the city and some of the major arterials into the rural area. We used to contract the bus stops in the city central and the west end until last year. We brought that service in-house. But I wanted to answer this question because it's really important. We rely on the contracted service because we can have them hit the ground at the same time we can. So we can get more people, more workers on the ground addressing across the city than if we just had in-house access. So it's really important, and that manages well. And the contractor doesn't just decide when they're going to plow. That has to be triggered by a city manager in the public works area.
Thank you. So now we move to the recommendation. We need a mover and a seconder for it. You'll see it in the package. Where are we? Yeah, so that the EITP committee recommended council that council adopt the revised public works winter maintenance policy as presented in Exhibit A of report 19-010. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Any comments, debate? Councillor Osterhoff.
Just one more quick question. It got answered. Mr. Dixon had a question, or I thought it was a good question about contracting out. Did I miss that? And is that an option? You talk about requires additional record keeping or increased staffing and equipment, and obviously those are yellow lights. You know, it's going to cost us more to meet the minimum standards, which is the point here as well. So I guess I'm wondering, we haven't really, have we nailed the costs down, and is contracting out an option?
Through the chair, yes, I'm afraid you did miss that, actually. That's okay. So we do contract out. We contract out the arterial roads in the rural area. We contract sidewalk, snow clearing in the east, and the roads in the east, and bus stops. And the rest of the services are primarily provided in-house. The reason that we contract is one for cost, but also because we can have more workforce available to tackle the storm all at the same time, rather than the tiered effect that we get when you see the standards for, arterials down to local roads.
Did you have anything else to say, Councillor Osterhoff?
Do we have an idea where the costing is going in the increase, or is that set for when will we see the effects of the increase?
Through the chair, I'm not sure what increase we're referring to.
Well, this minimum standard, it says that it requires increased staffing and equipment.
Oh, thank you. The increased staffing and equipment will be primarily the addition to be able to do the sidewalk patrolling and the additional snow clearing standards that are required primarily for cycling lanes. So it's not really a contractor issue for us.
Okay.
It's going to be, those increases will be coming within the city's own budget. And we partly in equipment and partly with some man hours.
Thanks.
So I'm guessing the 2020 budget, then we'll find out what the exact amount of the public works winter control budget will be at year over year. We'll be able to look at that.
That is correct. See it broken out just as winter, because our budget, our staff perform winter control, they parks maintenance, all of the things that they do. So you won't necessarily see it that way. It's built in. But Mr. Lennon has been pretty creative in trying to manage staff and looking at routes, and so we've tried to keep it so that it's as manageable as possible.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Neal.
If you could confirm in this, maybe for the benefit of new councillors, unless the policy is changed, we have a winter control budget, which if we don't spend it all in the year, it goes into a reserve so that in future years when we have more storms, we don't have to take a wrench in our budget. Is that accurate?
Actually, that's not the way we do it. Some communities do that. What we do is we budget for our average winter expectation, and if in fact there was a surplus at the end of the year, it would be shown as a surplus in our budget. If we go over budget, then we have a contribution from the working fund reserve to offset that by policy.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, before we vote, I just wanted to say, this isn't as a councillor, so just as the chair of the committee, that we appreciate the work that's gone into this revised policy, and we would understand that some of the new changes may require some adjustment by staff, and of course, our patience with those adjustments, especially, for example, with the cycling lanes, and how to clear those and get the snow removal done in a timely fashion seems to be a bit of a conundrum by my reading of the report. So I understand that is something it's kind of a bit of an unknown right now, because we don't know how much snow we're going to get and how much of a pickle we could get in with that snow removal. So I just wanted to say that before we vote, that I appreciate the work that's going into it. And I agree with the public comment that it has improved recently. That said, I guess I'll call the question unless someone else wants to speak. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Our second order of business is an information report. Questions from the committee will be in order. We'll ask, it's a report from the President and CEO of Utilities Kingston, and you'll see it. It's the Kingston Biosolids and Biogas Master Plan. Mr. Keach.
Through the chair, if I could just take a couple minutes to touch on a few highlights of the report, I would appreciate that. And any questions that the committee might have, Mr. Lucas, who is sitting here beside me, who did the vast majority of the heavy lifting on this file, wrote the report. Mr. McClatchy also have some involvement, and Heather Roberts from Solid Waste, I'd say, with the core group. But Alan here really did most of the work, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions. So just a couple comments at the start. First off, I would like to say this is, I'd say, a very different type of project that we are looking at here. I think it's a very interesting one. It's something that I personally have had an interest in for probably about 20 years, since we became involved with the sewage system for the City of Kingston. I think that's something that could be quite exciting for the City of Kingston. When I say the City of Kingston, I'm not saying the corporation, I'm saying the community, but also for the corporation, the City of Kingston, and Utilities Kingston. So at a very, very, very high level, what we're looking at here is taking part of the sewage treatment process. So the Ravensview plant as an example, where during that process in big tanks, and I'm going to try to keep this quite simple, where the solid part of the sewage sits near the end of the process, produces gas, produces methane. For years, and I'm going back many, many years ago, this would have been burnt off, been flared off. We use it or have used it for process heat, heating the facilities. And more recently, we do have a small cogen unit at Ravensview that we use it for. But it's really moving beyond that and not just taking the amount of gas that would normally be produced, but actually try to enhance the production of gas. So you're getting more gas out of it. And one of the things that we are looking at is taking the organics and adding to it to produce more gas. Then cleaning the gas that it's produced and looking at possibly injecting this back into our natural gas distribution system. So that has a number of benefits. Number one, you don't have to buy it, either in the States or out west. You don't have to transport it. It is viewed as being, I believe, green natural gas is one of the terms for it. And there is some very distinct value for that. So that's at an extremely high level. I'm not going to go into the details of the report. It looks at a number of different options. We have been working at this since 2017. As I said, we've actually talked about it for a number of years before that. We've looked at a number of different scenarios. Which facility would we possibly do it at? Would we look at starting a process at a standalone facility? Talked about the organics, adding to that, looking at possibly increasing the amount of organics that we have. And one of the things that's not touched on in this report, but it's kind of always been a vision of mine, is if you could actually make this happen, then can we look at Napanee, Brockville, Belleville, other places to bring in both the sludge and the organics as well? Because, in addition to it being, I think, a very, very good environmental project, I think it could also be a very good economic development project. And when you look at bringing those two things together, I think is actually pretty key. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I could ramble on about this all evening. As I said, it's something we're excited about, but open it up for questions. One thing I do want to point out, this is a work in progress. This is not a final report. One of the reasons that we are here tonight is that Mr. Lucas and his team are going to embark on a process for getting public input into it. So we wanted the committee and council to be aware of what we are doing before we go down that road. We have suggested some possible viable options or preferred options. What I do want to point out is we continue on with this. There may be others that come out. I wouldn't sort of jump off and say, yes, this is what we're looking at for sure. The other thing is we have given you rough dollar estimates. Again, that's rough dollar estimates. They need to be refined more. But one of the exciting things is, and I'm kind of repeating myself, I realize, we do believe that there is a business case for this if all the stars align here. So with that, I don't think I'll make any more comments, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Keep in mind, this is an information report. We're not voting on this tonight, and this is kind of a preliminary report, but questions are in order so that we can understand the process. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty, and then Councillor Osterhoff.
Thank you. So I have a couple, what you would call high-level questions, and then one detailed question. So I think this sounds really fantastic. What will it take to make it happen, and what could the potential best-case scenario timeframe be?
When you started, I thought these were going to be easy questions. But very valid questions. What will it take to make it happen? I think initially the will of this committee, the will of council, the will of the community, because we are going into a public process to get comments for this. And, having done this for many, many years, you have projects that sound really good. They look good from a number of different aspects, but you can get a different perspective from the public. So I think that will be one. I would say as we further refine this and the dollars get better refined, there will be a financial side to it as well. As I said, it looks promising at this point. At certain points, it did not look promising. And I think as long as that continues on, I think there's a good chance that it will happen in one form or another. I guess what, kind of what is the best, like I'm going to say the best possible outcome of this. I think it's positive from an environmental aspect, as I talked about, and also positive from a business case aspect. And I think it is one of these things, if it, again, could all come together, will put Kingston in a very positive light. You go back to some of the goals of the city, most sustainable city in the country, that type of thing. I think it could be a good plus to that.
Yeah, and I also asked a frame, like how long would something like this take to build?
I apologize, I missed that. I would say it's going to take years. It's kind of difficult to say that right at the moment. I think if something like this could be in place and operating in 5 years, that would be very positive. I don't think that's out of the question, but I think that would be a push to make that happen. I don't know, Al, do you want to add to that?
Yes, if I could add to that. Currently, there's a real move with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. There's a group called the Ontario Water Consortium, which I sit in on a number of meetings, and there's been discussions with MECP about streamlining the process. There's a number of approvals that will be needed, which can't be done until a detailed design is complete. So if the move is positive, Stratford is going through this process slightly differently than us, but they're about to embark on construction, I believe. They're really forging ahead to help the rest of us in the province be able to expedite our processes. And, I think Jim's right in saying 5 years, but if this happens, it could be 2 to 3 years. And in terms of the value, I mean, if you look at the table of net present values and we talk with the source separated organics, simply Kingston source separated organics, realistically, in speaking with Heather Roberts, there is a potential to be able to easily double the amount that we have now from 4,000 tons to 8,000 tons, which makes a break even at the worst case scenario to a positive $18 million net present value.
So, thanks. And I have a question.
Go ahead.
And that's 6 of your report, and I just don't, and I think that's what you were just referring to, that kind of calculation. The difference between the Cataraqui Bay 4,000 tons versus the 8,000 tons, and then in the net present value range really jumps like from 12.5 million to 2.5 million. So could you just explain that? Like, we don't, because I don't understand it.
Mr. Chair, what these numbers represent, so with the 4,000 tons, that's a negative 12.5 million. So it's really not a viable payback in the worst case scenario to a positive break-even scenario, $1 million here or there. A lot of this is based on a couple of scenarios, and the price of this renewable natural gas that can be obtained is really the key to it, as well as the amount of money that we could make from the tipping fees for the organics. And so that's where the range, if we double the amount of organics from 4,000 to 8,000, it becomes a break even to a really good news story, and that's based on a 20-year payback.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Sorry, just looking at the table, the third column, biogas at 57% methane meters cubed, that whole line there, you'll see the numbers going up, but the capital costs are the same at Cataraqui Bay, right? So that's higher volume, and then the range there is dependent on the price and, as you said, the tipping revenue.
And the amount of gas that is actually produced by adding the additional organics, yes.
So the range of the type of gas that you could,
Yeah.
the yield that you might get.
And right now, the analysis was based on what we currently are producing, which is about 57% methane content. In order to make it renewable natural gas for pipeline injection, we have to basically make it 99.9% methane. And so there's roughly within the costs of all of the ones where we're looking at these, it's about a $2.5 million investment to do that.
So, Councillor Neal. Off was first, then Councillor Neal.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the report. I echo Councillor Doherty's questions, and I think this is fantastic. It's right up my wheelhouse, too. I'm very, very familiar with this. Was there a change then in the technology? Would cogen also be an increase, or the green gas option is that going to be in our future technology? Obviously, you're weighing out which one will be more cost effective. So whether we produce electricity or whether we produce green gas, how did you decide that?
Through you, thank you. The current cogen unit that was installed in the 2006 through 2009 upgrade has about 5 years worth of realistic life left in it.
I thought so. Yeah.
At the end of that realistic life, do we put in another unit? Do we put in a fuel cell? Do we put in something different? Right now, with the price of electricity, what it is, the actual benefit is not there from cogen. In fact, we can optimize and increase the life of that cogen if we simply use it for electrical peak shaving, which means we're going to have even more gas to do something with. And that's where the concept of creating this clean gas. And just to put it in perspective, so the current price for natural gas in the pipeline is between $5 and $6 a gigajoule. Fortis BC just signed a contract with Stratford for their gas, and they're paying $27 a gigajoule, a 4 to 5 times increase of the value of natural gas because they have a mandate in British Columbia for renewable natural gas. Now, not a molecule of the gas will make it there, but they will get the carbon credits for that. Part of the next phase in this master plan process will be to work with the public and to work with council and say, what do we want to do with this gas? Because you can see that last column in that table that I've been referring to. It talks about the percent of the natural gas that would be as compared to what we currently bring into the city. And it's not significant, but it is significant when we start thinking, could we use this and say it's all being used for city facilities? And all the, or how many ever the city facilities could be fueled by renewable natural gas. Another real benefit from this is using it as transportation fuel. There's a lot of transports on the 401 currently that are running on natural gas. They are looking for converting to and buying renewable natural gas. There would be some logistics involved with that, and it might not be injecting in a pipeline, or it might be putting it into a truck and taking it to the natural gas fueling station that they've put in the Flying J in Napanee. So there is a huge benefit from a transportation sector to convert to something that is carbon neutral.
Fantastic. I'm just thrilled to hear this and hope that it can be forward. Did you say, so Stratford, is there a municipality in Ontario where the green gas is now, are we one of the first to get it this far in the concept stage?
So Stratford is probably one step ahead of us. They've been working with the innovation branch at the Ministry of Environment to basically test the waters, because we are dealing with a number of approvals, not only with the wastewater treatment plant, if we site it there, but also with the waste management regulation, with the air and noise regulation, the Environmental Protection Act, traffic. And so that's where the real time frame, and when we started this 2 years ago, took the approach that we're going to have to go through these approvals. There was a great opportunity with the cap and trade program of money coming in that could fund this. That died, but this is not going to die. The clean fuel standard of the Government of Canada is coming in. We're going to have to meet it. The other place where there's currently an active effort to buy is in Quebec, that they have their natural gas standards, and there's a certain percentage that they're seeking to get as renewable natural gas within the gas system in Quebec. So there's at least 2 markets, and California is always out there.
Yeah, fantastic. I just want to say that. Fantastic work. Keep it up.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Couple of questions. You mentioned carbon neutral. How close to carbon neutral is the product at the end of this process? And and does that carbon neutral label include all of the preparation to get to that product? And I'll explain why. I had an interesting conversation with somebody who's an energy environmentalist approach, and his feeling was that that biogas is the bridge to where we need to get to 2050, but that eventually we need everything on an electrical grid with renewable green energy, solar and wind. And I'm just curious whether we see this as a bridge to that 2050 target, like how, if we're still burning fuel, how can it be carbon neutral?
So from a carbon neutral perspective, if you think about the only carbon that is going into this is organic material that comes out of our bodies or comes out of waste food, or so that's where even when the cap and trade program, in California's cap and trade program, if it's from an organic source where you're generating this gas or the material, then you don't pay carbon credits on that. You don't have to buy carbon credits for it. And so that's where it's carbon neutral. The other way the process can be even better and more beneficial, where it can actually be a carbon sink, is taking organic material that we heard earlier that possibly used on farm fields. If we take farm waste and put it into these digesters, then we're actually taking material that's otherwise going to sit in a field and rot and create methane, which is 37 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. That is a huge benefit to actually reducing the carbon. As far as a bridge to the future, yes, it's a bridge to the future, but it also can be the future, because there is processes out there where they're taking pipeline gas and basically converting it into hydrogen and capturing this carbon dioxide and using it in injection into deep wells. So there is an example where if we're creating this gas and then it gets further processed into pure hydrogen, and right now there is work being done in Canada to look at increasing the opportunity to inject pure hydrogen into the natural gas pipes, because we already got the infrastructure in place. It will still burn. It will burn as clean as the methane. And the County of Leeds in England is looking at going 100% hydrogen with their natural gas system. They're doing it on a piecemeal basis. So there is, the hydrogen economy may certainly rival the electric economy in 20 years, 30 years.
If I could just add to that. So I would say, yes, it's a bridge to the future that we don't know. And just having spent the last couple of days in Toronto at a conference talking about what the future of energy is, the one thing I came away from that was realizing that there has been more changes in the last 6 months than there probably has been in the last 60 years from an electrical perspective. The other comment, and although my background is electricity, the idea that we're going to replace all fossil fuels with electricity, the infrastructure in this continent is just nowhere near capable of doing that. So I go to the comment about the future. There are other things that are going to be discovered, we're going to have to discover, and it makes me a little nervous when I think we're looking at electrification of transportation, which is great, but the electrification of everything, the whole way that we look at the electric grid would have to completely change. And there were some numbers that were provided as the amount of energy in the province now that's electricity and the amount that's natural gas. And I think natural gas is like double what's currently there for electricity. So you would basically triple the electrical infrastructure. So that's a long-winded, this is a step to the future of which we're not really sure what it's going to be.
I look forward more about this and attending the publics that you have planned. The one other thing that I think is a positive, potential positive for this, is that right now we're using up an awful lot of very viable farmland to produce corn and other products for ethanol production. And when we're living in a world, perhaps North America, we're blessed with not having a food shortage, but in a world that has a food shortage, the idea of converting potential food to ethanol for gas doesn't seem the best use of farmland to me. So.
It's a fascinating conversation. It's not the subject of this report, unfortunately, and it is getting late. Any other questions about the report about the biogas? Mr. Rosanek.
When we go seeing this with the public and whatnot, would there be any smell associated with doing this that neighborhoods, would be upset with?
Yes, but we are engineers, and certainly any location will have to have strict controls. And I dealt with Ravensview, where we have neighbors right on our fence line, and we have to be very conscious, very cognizant of the impacts. And co-locating an organics receiving facility, we know what Norterra, Tomlinson's facility has caused out there, and that is a composting facility. It's not a biosolid. However, you come out to Ravensview, you come out to Cataraqui Bay with the odor controls that are in place at the wastewater treatment plants, that it is clearly demonstrated there is an ability to control the odors through mechanical means, and that's really what would have to happen.
Thank you. And then would we be able to pick up more garden waste? Like, how right now we can't really use the green bins for garden waste. It's only supposed to be food. So with this, we could use garden waste as well. And maybe this would, we could pitch it to the public that we could, start doing garden waste pickup right at everyone's driveways. Is that a good spin that would be beneficial to the community?
It's not like we would be. Yes, we could process the organics. It doesn't really matter what the organics are, but certainly we would have to be very careful about the recipe. I think here of there's a facility on Disco Road in Toronto where they basically take in the Toronto's source separated organics from the residential area, and they're creating gas and they're making electricity with that. Another facility is it's Stormfisher in London, Ontario, where they are currently making 2.7 megawatts of electricity with their facility, but they're simply taking in dry or food waste from off-spec foods, recalls from health, brewers' waste, etc. So they've got a recipe. Their facility is happy. The microorganisms that are in the tanks. It's possible. It's perhaps a little too optimistic. I think the other side to the leaf and yard waste is it currently is actually a very good organic source for mulching. And you don't need to do a lot of processing with it, and certainly talking earlier with our master gardeners, I learned of a desire to get some mulch, and so there is perhaps a better opportunity to use that in an alternate way. And I think personally, the holistic approach that we used for this master plan that we're undertaking is what we need to sort of spread out even further with the organics and even with our waste collection. There are processes out there where, if the government of Ontario brings in an organics ban at the landfills, how strict are they going to be? Is it going to really hit the ICI sector where we currently don't collect in Kingston? There is a huge opportunity there to look at a processing facility where basically you take and you slurry the garbage and you squeeze out the organics. The inorganics go off the landfill, and the rest we process into gas. And there's technologies out there right now that can do that.
Thank you. And my last question, just to wrap things up, pet waste, like pet waste from dogs, would that be part of that, or is that totally separate? Because when I saw the word anaerobic digester, I got all excited, right? Because that's what it takes to process like dog waste.
So waste right now, flush it down your toilet. Dog waste is not a problem. What we do have a problem with is cat waste. There are microorganisms in the cat feces that cannot be treated at a wastewater treatment plant conventionally. So from pet waste, your dogs are fine. Unfortunately, the other piece to the cat waste is they tend to put the cat litter in, which is really just clay. And I mean, it's a bulking agent which does not digest. It would just become a big lump in our digesters. And Paul, Mr. McClatchy across the way there remembers our discussions about animal waste about 2 years ago.
Does anyone else have any different kinds of waste they want to ask a question about? We've lost our audience somehow. No other questions? No, it is, all joking aside, it is a very exciting project, and look forward to the next report, and thank you very much. That's it. Oh, yeah. Members, before we wrap up that piece, members of the public have a chance to make comment and ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much to staff for a very interesting report and some fascinating discussion. I want to praise Council Committee as well for their research and questions. This does bring back some memories for me. Second year chemistry course from many years ago, we looked at sort of early concepts around this. So I'm wondering if you're looking at what they're doing in, say, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, and Japan on this. I think they're maybe a little bit ahead of us, and they have actually something functioning, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering what the possibility of a potential partnership with Queen's University, because I know that they have some really tremendous chemists over there and chemical engineers dealing with some of the specialized areas. It's clear from the discussion we've had that we have enormous expertise in the room already. And I want to really praise that. It's a specialized area. So I just think maybe there's somebody at Queen's who might really know a lot, and it would really pay the city well to try to do a formal project with it. Maybe it's a thesis at the PhD level or something like that. So those are my comments. I want to wish you all the best with it.
Staff can respond.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. With respect to the technology that this has been developed, that we've been looking at, this biohydrolysis was developed in France, and so it certainly is being utilized there, and we certainly are tapping in wherever we can to any of the technologies that are out there. I am actually very pleased to say that the Queen's research it's a great opportunity. We have previously, when we were finishing up the project at Ravensview, did a research project where we were looking at adding fats, oils, and grease to our digesters, which is still quite a potential opportunity here, which might dovetail nicely in with this organics to further increase the gas production and provide an outlet for waste. So I do a lot of work with Dr. Pascal Champagne on that. There was a number of theses that were produced. A PhD, Chen-Si Lee, was one of the ones that comes to mind because she was quite memorable, done a lot of projects. We are also currently undertaking another research project to optimize the digester startup and further improve the operation of the digesters. And there's he's currently a master student, Alan Chang Bejarano from Mexico, is doing the work on that under Dr. Pascal Champagne again, and he is looking at furthering his research at a PhD level to look at the organics addition. So I'm glad to say that we're embarking on that already, so thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right, the only thing left on the agenda is we've got no motions or notices of motion, but there's an item for other business, and I understand Councillor Neal wanted to let us know about a motion to council that has implications to the active transportation master plan.
Yes, we have a motion that's going to be on the agenda that we get tomorrow night. It's regarding active transportation camping opportunity at Lake Ontario Park. As you may be aware, we closed the campground a couple of years ago, and this is a recommendation that came forward. The chair of this committee seconded that motion, and so I'm looking forward to it coming to council next week. Originally, the motion was to come here, but it's one of those awkward motions that actually belongs in three different umbrella groups: admin services, EITP, or parks, because it engages all of those mandates. So this was at the recommendation of senior staff that we bring it directly to council, so that it doesn't get bounced around other committees. So if anybody has any questions regarding that motion, feel free to call me or email me. Thank you.
So that'll be on the October agenda as a motion to council.
Yes, next week.
So noted. Any other business? Okay, so then we have correspondence. There's an item of correspondence in your package about Kingston Transit from Mr. Dixon. Have a chance to read that. And our next meeting is not until December 10th. Hopefully we won't have a significant winter weather event by then. And are looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Doherty, Councillor Osterhoff, all those in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.